This half hour being brought to you by Purdy Insurance. Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. Auto, home, life, business, boat, motorcycle, RV. Ah, yes. We all have multiple insurance needs. They take care of all of them, making sure you're fully insured and getting you the best price to save you money. It is all at Purdy Insurance. Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. A man who's in incredible demand, yet carves out minutes for us. Nate Bauer, sir, welcome.
How are we doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
You know, Christmas is over, so I feel like I hit the finish line. Like I got across the tape. 2 kids, wife, family in town, whole deal.
It was wonderful, by the way, to meet your dad the other night. I really enjoyed that.
He was thrilled to meet you and wanted to make sure that I told you that he was thrilled to meet you. So you're the celebrity here, sir.
Oh, jeez. Oh, brother. Okay. Well,
I know.
You know me. It's really all about really my ego. You know, we all know. Okay. All right. Okay, so in this scenario, they beat SMU, right back to work. Next step is the Fiesta Bowl. James has tried to keep things as normal as possible. In other words, Wednesday may have been Christmas night, but it was Sunday, off day yesterday, then back to work. And that's how he's done it, the same way. How important, in your opinion, is that kind of routine to a team?
I think it's very important. Some of the guys alluded. They just had a couple of Fiesta Bowl press conferences via Zoom a few moments ago, and I think they acknowledged a little bit some. I don't know what the word is: frustration, disappointment at having to practice on Christmas Day. Nobody really likes that. That's not the best vibe in the world, but you get over it, right? Like you once you get back into the habit and into the routine, I think that everybody was kind of locked in by Wednesday night, and yeah, it's an established trend that they have here. I think and maybe we even fall into this a little bit, is once you fall, like it's almost like we don't know the day of the week right now, right?
I agree.
Because for them, it's what, Tuesday, right? So this is a Tuesday practice right now. Is kind of getting back at it, and then you're going into, in their minds, a Saturday game when really, in reality, it's obviously on Tuesday.
Right, and yes, I was at the practice on Christmas night, so I was there. I saw it. Now let's get to what they did against SMU. When you look at the tempo with which SMU played at, the talent level which SMU brought to the table, what did you think of Penn State's overall performance, especially in the conditions?
Yeah, I thought it was. I'm fixated on game flow right now, and I think it's not necessarily given enough credit for how much of an influence those types of things have on getting you in or out of your identity as a football team. And so when the other team throws you the ball, right, and you can score 14 points off of it in quick succession, it just totally upended the nature of that game. I'm not sure that I would argue that Penn State played a great game, right? Like in terms of their identity, certainly in the first half offensively, things were disjointed, which is, I think to be expected to a certain degree, just based on how cold it was and the wind throwing off the passing game. But it's one of the strengths that this team has, in my opinion, is truly a versatility in the ways that they can beat you. That there are any number of game scenarios, game tenor type identities, right? Game flow identities that can take place over the course of a season, and Penn State has an answer for all of them. And so I just think that the way that things transpired really didn't allow SMU to do what it does best, which is keep you on your toes offensively. It just, the quarterback made those mistakes. They were absolute daggers. I think it's underrated how important Rojas, not only intercepting that pass, but taking it back for a touchdown. Right? Because I'm not sure I would have argued, or I'm not sure I would have said at that point in the game a heightened confidence that Penn State's offense could have produced points off of that field position had he just gone down.
Yeah. Well, now they get ready for this. It's a completely different challenge. I mean, Smith is a really good running back, the converted wide receiver who gained over 1,200 yards this year. They got control of him. How much of Ashton Genty have you watched this season, and if so, what impresses you about him?
Yeah, enough, right? I mean, certainly we don't get to see a ton of Mountain West games here on the East Coast, right? So you see highlights. I mean, honestly, I would just echo what the players themselves and Tom Allen have said about him, which is his low center of gravity, right? Yeah. He just has this size to him that is compact, and so bringing him down is, if not the biggest challenge that Penn State's defense has had this season, it's up there, right? He can burn you. The comparison was made, I think it was Kobe King maybe just said it, of Blake Corum as a little bit of a comp. Tom Allen said that Derrick Henry in his career was a comp, right? When Tom Allen was at Ole Miss. So, this is lofty praise for a guy who I think, as I've seen Penn State fans kind of digest this matchup, the fact that he plays in a not a power conference has created a perception for Penn State fans that it's not necessarily as good as the numbers suggest. And I think it's just the opposite. I think that Penn State knows. Penn State has a true appreciation for what this guy has been able to do, and is expecting every bit of that challenge to come through on New Year's Eve.
Right. No, I mean, look, the guy's a great player. There's no getting around it. Not big in stature. It's interesting for a guy that's 5'9", his stance in the backfield is straight up and down. But see, this is where I think the Penn State offense comes into play. If your offense is generating points, Nate, now do you get them at some point out of their game, which means not as much of him?
Yep, 100%. It's, again, that game flow element. I am not, again, my pregame study of the opponent, it's not comprehensive, right? Sure. I'm not able to know as much as a Boise State reporter would know, but just the impression that I'm left with is that this is a vulnerable Boise State defense, right? They do one thing really, really well. They sack the quarterback. They get tackles behind the line of scrimmage. Yep. They are excellent at doing that. I think that when you dig into yards per play, when you dig into some of the other tertiary stats, they show some vulnerability. They show against good offenses that they can be got, right? Particularly in the passing game. Yeah. So if Penn State is able to do what they've largely been doing, which is having that versatility, right? Drew needs to have a better game than he did against SMU. But if the running back, Nick Singleton, I think, is averaging 8.1 yards a carry in December, Katron Allen, I think, is 7.8. So if those guys can do what they've done and get Drew Allard going too and keep the ball in their hands, yeah, I think there's an opportunity there for Penn State to kind of dictate the flow of the game and, as you said, mitigate a little bit of what that Genty can do.
And what's interesting is they're the team with 3 weeks off between games. So that additional rest has got to help them. There's no question about that. But you and I both know that sometimes 3 weeks between games is not the best deal because of the possibility of rust, and rust translates into missing tackles.
Yep. T. Frank, my colleague, said to me coming off of practice today that, and I thought it was a great point, that if there is any game Penn State has had this season where a good start could help, right, and really change things for them, it's this one. It could help on both sides of the ball, mostly because, as he pointed out, they've been playing with a lead all season. Boise has not
That's right.
had to. I'm sorry, what's that?
No, exactly. Go ahead.
Yeah, right. Like they've had a 2-touchdown lead for most of the season.
Mm-hmm.
If that's not the identity of the game, how does that change things for them? I think it changes things significantly. If they have to pass, that changes things. That alters things. So it's going to be very, very important for Penn State to get out to a good start, right? To not have some of the hiccups that they've experienced, at least offensively, for most of the season.
This format's interesting. Boise State was able to get, as one of the top 4 rated conference champions, a bye. Is there anything about the college football playoff structure, since Penn State's involved in it, we're all living through it, that you would tweak as to how the structure is right now?
Yeah, I'd blow the whole thing up. I think it's a tremendous, right? Like, the game had to evolve. This is great. The fact that they expanded it to 12 is great. It is going to redefine what success means in college football, which is crucial to college football because everyone has lost their minds, right? For a decade, people thought, and Penn State being the most localized version of it, that Ohio State's the same, right? Some of these other programs that expect to be successful and to have the highest levels of achievement, the notion that the only thing that's successful is by making a 4-team playoff was crazy. It was just dumb. It was lunacy for a decade. So this is a huge stride to get to 12. I think personally they need a structure, and again, like, I don't have necessarily a detailed answer of how this happens, but there has to be a structure that allows a seeding that is just automatic, that takes humans out of it. I'm the whole Kirk Herbstreit conversation, all of these people sniping each other back and forth would be taken care of if it was simply, hey, this is where you finished in your conference. Well, this is the slot that you go into, right? Or this is where you finished in some combination, the formulaic BCS era, combining everything into a ranking. I don't even have a problem with that, right? Like, some way to take this out of it, because as it stands, you can see this doesn't make sense. Why does Penn State get Boise and Ohio State gets Oregon, or vice versa? Why does Oregon, as the number 1 overall seed, have to play Ohio State? Right? There's a lot that, to me, doesn't make a ton of sense. I think that the buys don't necessarily make sense. I think the automatic conference affiliation, automatic bids don't necessarily make sense. There's a lot that can be improved upon it, and I think it will be, because every coach in America is going to see this and say, hey, okay, a stride has been taken. A significant, important stride has been taken. It's time to tweak this and actually make a playoff that makes sense.
Yeah, for me, look, college basketball has provided a blueprint for college football. They need to follow it. In other words, when it comes to the recruiting part, the early signing date, college basketball is the second Wednesday in November. Well, that's just off the preseason. College football should make it the first Wednesday in August. Okay, playoff. You may be the ACC champion, you win the tournament, but that doesn't mean you're on the one line. You could be the 3 seed. Okay? Well, that got you in the tournament automatically. 5 automatic bids, I'm all for it. But at that point, you seed them 1 through 12 as to what you think is 1 through 12. That's my opinion. You can take off from there.
Yeah, no, I'm right with you. I'm not. I think with a limited number, right, as opposed to 68, and obviously all of the automatic bids that go in the NCAA tournament, that's to me that makes more sense to have that committee approach than this necessarily does. I just think there is. You're putting these people in an impossible position to begin with, but and maybe this is what do they say? It's a feature, not a bug. Right? Is the sport wants this dialogue, it wants this attention, it wants this type of fighting. I'm just not sure it's. If you look at the NFL, and I understand that college football and the NFL are different, but nobody has any issue with how seeding is done in the NFL playoffs. Right? Yeah. If you can come up with a way to make it make sense and have the most deserving teams get into an advantageous situation in the playoffs and then let things seed out from there, that to me that makes sense. I just think any movement towards structure, and rules is good for college football, because right now they don't have any. It is a systemless system.
Yeah, exactly. That's you need better leadership across the board. By the way, Hoop's going to actually get going with the Big Ten season starting on the second. How do you like the positioning right now?
Good. I think they missed an opportunity at Rutgers. Honestly,
agreed.
That was not totally their fault. Certainly they did not get a good whistle in that game, but nonetheless, it is what it is. They come back and have an opportunity to play some games against some teams that they should beat. Yeah. So I think that just given the circumstances, given how tight that obviously you and I were both watching Penn State football, but given how tight that Drexel game got, to be able to get out of there with a win was extremely important. They should beat Penn easily here on Sunday at the Bryce Jordan Center. But then after that, it is set up very, very well for them. They're in a prime position, right, to go 10-1 in non-conference games, and then enter the Big Ten schedule right at 1-1. Yeah, that's pretty ideal. They're gonna have to stockpile wins because the non-conference schedule is so bad. They don't have the number of quality wins in the non-conference that will give them a wiggle room in the Big Ten schedule to win any fewer than 10 games, right? They're going to have to get to 500, obviously, but I would even argue right now that number might have to get to 11.
My friend, thank you so much. Appreciate it, as always, and see you there.
The privilege is mine. Thanks for having me, as always, and I can't wait to see you out there in Phoenix.
Sounds great. Thanks so much. The great Nate Bauer from On3.com will be joined by Thomas Frank Carr coming up in just a few moments and talk with him and get his film breakdown of Ashton Genty of Boise State, the Boise State defense. We're going to do that in the next half hour. This half hour brought to you by Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. Auto, home, life, business, boat, motorcycle, RV. We all have multiple insurance needs, and we also want to be with somebody that is going to make sure that we save money. That's right. It's all at Purdy Insurance. Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com here on News Radio 1070 WKOK. This half hour brought to you by Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Imports, domestics, microbrews, the best selection of beer anywhere. Wine coolers, water, soft drinks, snacks. They roast their peanuts fresh and not every day. 6 great flavors of slushies. And now ready to drink cocktails like High Noon, Crown Royal, and Jack Daniels. And the pickle bar led by the two personal favorites, the Barrels and the Dills, indeed second to none. All at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Stock up for New Year's now at Brewers Outlet. Very pleased to bring in my good friend, Thomas Frank Carr. T. Frank, welcome back. It's so great to hear you.
Great to hear you. So great to hear you as well. Hope you had a great Christmas, and I think we're going to be spending our New Year's Eve in a similar fashion, it seems.
Yes, I believe we shall. As a matter of fact, at least it's close to Zoe's family, right? Relatively.
Yeah. Same time zone. We'll give it that. I think you can get to Vegas at least in like 5 hours from Salt Lake, so it's drivable at the very least. But I've been only a couple of places when we've been out there, so my sense of geography before going was basically zero, and it's still basically zero.
Yeah, I've probably done a few more games out there than you have. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're the master. I mean, brilliant of the film breakdown. Brilliant at it. When you look at, let's just start with Boise State. Genty reminds me a lot in result of Barry Sanders. 2 yards, 3 yards, lost 2, gained 1, lost 1, 80 yards. Am I right or wrong about that?
So I think there's a certain aspect, and somebody actually brought this up, that's a little bit like Saquon when at Penn State, where I think with Barry Sanders, and you would know more Barry Sanders than I would. I've seen a lot of the highlights. I don't see him retreating. And I know you said in results, but the process to me is what's important. And I'm just so impressed by his process. He reads the hole well. He makes a lot of really good decisions, but I don't know that his offensive line consistently puts him in a chance to succeed, which is scary given the fact that he's got like 2,400 yards on the season. So yeah, baked in there is a little bit of that 2 yards, 20 yards, where he just suddenly, he finds a hole and he's able to attack it, and they get him to the edge, and suddenly he gets a chunk play. But I wouldn't, I guess the difference, when I think of Barry Sanders, I think of dancing around in the backfield and trying to elude defenders.
Right.
I think he's just so natural and fluid that there's a little bit of that difference in my mind when you bring that up, I guess, in the imagery of what I'm looking at.
Right, and I'm sorry, that's why I said result. I didn't say style.
Yeah,
result.
Sure.
The other part too is that last year, going back a year ago, he was used a lot in the pass game. They haven't used him a lot in the pass game this year. When you watch the breakdown, is it just because he's running so well they don't have to?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I'm still going through some of the film on the offense, and I've been focusing primarily on the ground game because that's been where they've used him primarily, to your point. It seems like the offense is very predicated on him and then the deception of him. So if you're going to be doing play action and everyone's drawn one way and then you boot out the other way, it's harder to get the running back involved than if you're going to use him as such a, the celestial body of like, he has such a gravity about him that he's going to take the defense one way, giving you the opportunity to open up other guys in the offense, in play action and some of those play action shots. Because when they're not running quick game, they want to get the ball down the field on some bigger hitters. And that's when they do it on play action. And that's, I think, 36% of the quarterback's dropbacks have been, in that vein, and then, his average depth of target on those goes up, and it's harder to then involve the running back when he is that key cog in the play action to draw everyone one way.
Right. And by the way, just so everybody knows, Genty has 10 runs of 60 yards or better this season. That's the big play capability. When you look at the defense, we know the pass rush, the TFLs are there. But when you look at a defense as to how they play overall, and the fact that they have 3 weeks off, you and I both know what suffers in 3 weeks off. Tackling. How well does Boise State tackle?
Not well at all. They're hyper aggressive, and I think part of it is, over pursuit, and then there is like zero in the secondary, the safety. I don't know. I was watching film this week with my buddy Landon Tengwall. We do the tailgate show before your show on the Sports Network. We were joking that I don't know that zero for Boise State understands that he has arms, because he only throws shoulders. Sometimes he throws his head. He doesn't actually wrap up ever. So, I think as much as we talk about Ashton Genty and the broken tackles and Penn State, some of their issues this year with making sure that they contain and they actually bring the ball carrier down once they get to the ball carrier, it's the same thing on the other side where, if Nick Singleton and Katron Allen get into the open against this defense, there could be big plays on both sides, on the ground and through the air. And that's been an area where Penn State has been improved quite a bit, is especially Nick Singleton getting to the second level and then making that player miss at the second level over the last 3 weeks of the season. He was starting out the season very strong doing that. Obviously, he got banged up, and that kind of went away for a while. Now that it's back, I think that's a huge thing in this game, because Penn State typically doesn't give up the explosive plays. They'll miss some tackles, but then the safeties and the corners, everybody rallies to stop, a 60-yard touchdown like you mentioned. Maybe they can do that against Ashton Genty, but on the flip side, if Nick Singleton gets a crease, I don't know that there's anyone on Boise State that's going to be running him down. So it's going to be very critical on both sides of the ball, but especially with Boise State, they're the worst tackling team in America in terms of percentage of missed tackles versus tackle opportunities.
Yeah.
So it's huge, and it's something, as you mentioned, that with 3 weeks off, you got to make sure you keep that thing sharp.
Yeah. All right. When you watch the videos, what do you think of the competition Boise State played?
It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating.
To me, they're hard to gauge.
Oregon didn't play a good game.
No.
Yeah, the Oregon struggled, and then you look at some of the UNLV is probably their best competition this year in terms of a team that pushed them and didn't allow them to be who they were all year. And I'm getting distracted watching the breakdowns of just obvious mistakes that UNLV is making, totally blown gaps, plan coverages in a way that I know Penn State doesn't play those things of, safeties being in the wrong position or completely not paying attention to their assignment and not, if you're a deep safety and it's man coverage and you have half the field to cover and a guy goes deep, you're supposed to follow him, Steve. Whether he's got a guy or not, in that particular coverage, that should be a double team. And there was a touchdown on that play, and I looked at it, I'm like, I don't know what to do with that. Because as much as Penn State maybe has struggled recently they've allowed some bigger plays through the secondary, they don't just fully break down on the basics. And so, yeah, the level of competition and the translatable, what does this say about what Penn State could do? That's why I'm still working through some of these things, and I'm taking extra time to watch the film. I've been trying to watch as much of the defense to start, because that's where I think the answer to this game lies in if Penn State can score and score quickly. Nobody has gotten Boise State out of rhythm. Nobody's forced them off their game script of feeding Ashton Genty the ball all game long. There's only been one game that I've counted so far where they've been down by at least 14 points. That was San Diego. I think it was San Diego State.
It was San Diego.
And then they give up the ball at the 2-yard line, and San Diego State does. And then, Boise State rallies. By halftime, the game is tied, and they're right back in the game, able to do what they normally do. It's been the translation factor in all of these situations of how Penn State's offense can take advantage of a defense that schematically, there's some things in there that Penn State can take advantage of and that they have all season. So what is Boise State going to do with those 3 weeks off to change some of those things up and protect against that? And what are they going to have to do, because that's who they are? That's the biggest challenge for me, is understanding kind of the gulf between those two ideas.
Yeah, it's an issue. What do you think of the quarterback? I mean, I know you've been concentrating a lot on the running game. I mean, he's only thrown 3 interceptions, and it doesn't take a genius to figure out he is an absolute beneficiary of having number 2 behind him. But when he actually does throw the ball, how good is he? Because obviously Tom knows Tom Allen, because he played for him in Indiana. So that's their top receiver. But what do you think of the quarterback?
I'll be honest. That's the area where I was going to go to next to take a look at what is, because I expect that Boise State's going to throw something at Penn State they haven't expected. They may come out and do things that they haven't done, because basic 3 weeks is like training camp at this point, where you get an additional install period if you want it. And so I do think he's going to play a big part in this game. What I have seen of him is that he's a good facilitator, good decision maker, but he's making a lot of pretty simple reads, at least from what I've seen of. Again, like I said, quick game, meaning he's just looking at either half-field reads or he's trying to pick apart zone defenses. And then he's making select shot plays and doing half-field reads on play action, where he's got, kind of a levels concept where he's just picking the guy that's open based on the way the coverage flows to the available target. So I haven't seen him make a full-field read at this point. Now, again, like I said, 90% of their offense is run plays with Ashton Jeanty anyway, but it is something that they're going to see some third and longs. So how does he perform in those situations, and how does the offensive line perform in those situations? Because I think the offensive line is pretty good. They got some good run blockers up front, but certainly not a complete unit. And so I don't think that we fully know after a full season the depth of the talent at Boise State. We can assume that there are cracks, but they just physically haven't been shown all that often. So that's where, like I said, I'm trying to go through all the film and trying to find all the situations of who has stressed them, where does the stress come from, how has it happened, and it's just hard when Ashton Jeanty on 2nd and 7 gets you 12 yards and suddenly the chains are reset and any opportunity to learn that is now gone. And on top of that, there is no Abdul Carter on the other side. There's guys that maybe could give you some flashes of Penn State's defensive line capabilities, but they don't have 4 across. They haven't seen 4 across that have played the way that Penn State's defensive line plays all season. And I include that game against Oregon, because that defensive line played much better the rest of the season, until they met the Penn State offensive line in the championship game. So I don't know. Maybe they were also who they were in that game, and we just didn't realize it for another 2 months.
Right. It's possible. Anybody that you've seen on tape so far, Genty's an obvious one, but somebody else we set back, you know what? That dude can play.
I like the defensive tackles.
Yes.
I think in a couple of games that I've seen them, they can be physical and disruptive in the run game.
Yep.
I wouldn't put them on a level of the Minnesota defensive line that gave Penn State problems, or, some of the other good defensive lines Penn State's seen, but they could play. And so that unit, I think, from the run game perspective, I respect that front 4 especially. So those are the, I think the tackles specifically are the ones that I'm keying in on pretty early. And then I know it's kind of off the board, but I love the defensive scheme. So those players play hard, they play together, but they absolutely benefit from the way they attack. I was looking at some of the, watching the way they blitz, it feels like they blitz on every single play. They don't, but when they do, they send 6 or more, I want to say 40% of the time. So almost half the time they're blitzing, they're sending overloads and pressures where you are either confused and you're letting a free runner get through, or you don't have enough blockers and the quarterback is hot on those plays. So as much as the sack totals are impressive, I think the scheme does a lot of heavy lifting to make the players look. I don't want to be disrespectful, because they got some good pass rushers. They got some good bodies on that defensive line, but Penn State's pass rush is better, and they don't have as many sacks. So, that's what I'm trying to get at, is the scheme elevates everybody who is playing at a good quality football level.
Penn State, of course, is coming off the win over SMU. The conditions were tough for kicking games. They were tough for passing games. The conditions aren't going to come into play in this. It's going to be indoors and on grass, as a matter of fact. How much does that help and benefit Penn State that it's indoors on grass and they don't have to deal with the wind and they don't have to deal with the cold temperatures?
Well, I think it benefits them that they can have a complete game on offense if they can execute, as opposed to it being a ground game where if that were at home and you had two, like it would certainly even the playing field against a team like Boise State over SMU. And this is where I have a hard time with that game, and I had to kind of. I mean, Steve, you were there. I was not there. I was in my studio. I was in my cozy office, breaking down the film live during the game. From a cognitive process, how much more difficult is it to operate in that cold and wind from the mental perspective? The physical side, I think, is apparent. Like, guys were not as fast. But I saw guys that weren't as mentally fast, and that is the part that I think, if that changes, then Penn State's offense, there is no answer for the Boise State defense if Penn State's offense is playing at its best and playing balanced.
Any early thoughts on what will be important in this game, based on some of the limited stuff you've broken down on each side? What will be important for us to watch Tuesday night?
So, like I mentioned, I've got a better sense of the defense, and because I think that's where the offense is Ashton Genty and friends, and so third and long situations are incredibly important for Penn State, as they always are. Starting fast, which I think means the offense has to chuck the ball around a little bit. They've come out in the last two games, and they've thrown the ball aggressively in the first quarter. James Franklin talked about calling the game to win and having no regrets. And on the offensive side, that has been aggressive. This Boise State defense, schematically, is the type of defense that Penn State and Drew Aller have shredded with deep passes this year. So if they're able to get, and that's, I think, the biggest thing. You mentioned that extra time off, Penn State throwing the deep ball. If they get the looks they're expecting, I would expect, if they get things that throw Drew Aller off and they have to pivot to the ground game, I think this game goes a little bit further into the typical game flow that we've seen recently. Mm-hmm. So being a fast start, I don't, even with Ashton Genty, that Boise State could match Penn State at its best. And that means Drew Aller's dealing, Nick Singleton, and Katron Allen, they're breaking tackles, everything that we kind of have put together schematically. I think Penn State has a huge the pressure packages and the aggression of the front. And so I guess that's the biggest thing. If they can keep Drew Aller clean and mentally centered, then I don't think that this is a contest.
Interesting. We'll see how it plays out, my friend. You're really the best at doing this. And by the way, Josh Allen's having an incredible year.
Yeah, the funny. First off, Steve, thank you for saying that. I appreciate the kind words. BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. If you want to read any of these or have this conversation with me, we can talk on the message board like Steve. Josh Allen also tanked my fantasy season by having 12 points against the Patriots when I was on the cusp of the championship game. But I still love him, and I'm very happy that he's in the MVP conversation. Even if he doesn't win it, I don't want to complain about my small little part of the world.
Thanks so much, Steve Frank. We'll see you out there.
All right. See you, Steve.
Thomas Frank Carr, always doing great work. Nobody does a better film breakdown than Thomas Frank Carr, and people really appreciate it. I mean, they really do. And I think that's so important that that everybody gets that kind of breakdown in a game, because I think people are looking for that little extra advantage as to what they see, and T. Frank gives it to them. Okay, so this half hour brought to you by Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury. The beverage supermarket imports domestics microbrews, the best selection of beer anywhere. Wine coolers, water, soft drinks, lots and lots of snacks. They roast their peanuts fresh and hot every day. 6 great flavors of slushies, by the way. And not only that, new additions for you to get excited about. And they now have on hand ready-to-drink cocktails like High Noon, Crown Royal, Jack Daniels. All Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket on News Radio 1070 WKOK.